Sometimes people focus on the name of Methodist Manor and wonder if it's restricted to Methodist belief or even Protestant. And we have kept the name Methodist Manor to indicate the overall ministry and mission of the campus. But it's open to any and all people from a variety of beliefs.
It's just interesting that there are so many people of different backgrounds and experiences, and so it's just very interesting to talk to people who are here now.
The thing that inspires me when I think of the early history of Oklahoma Methodist Manor is that first meeting where the vote was taken to begin a ministry that would never go out of business. And when I think of the faith and courage of determination of the people who were involved in that meeting, I sometimes laugh and wonder what it would have been like if somebody had sat down and said, wait a minute, I just put a pencil to this, and in 2016, it's going to cost over $16 million to keep this operation running. Would they have balked? Would they have hesitated? Would they have, with faith and courage and determination, gone forward with that vote? I'm so glad that we stand on the shoulders of giants who, because of that commitment, because of their faith and determination, we inherit the blessing of the community that is now Oklahoma Methodist Manor.
When this was gifted to the Methodist Conference, the Francis Willard home moved north of Tulsa, and this old building and the whole section of land was given to the manor.
It was a trade. We gave them some land out on the Gilcrease area, and we took over this. It had outside swimming pool, and we closed that up, and that was just the main building.
My experience with the manor goes back to the late 1950s when a group of women from my church were invited to tour the original building, which had been the Francis Willard Home for Girls. A group of us came and walked around and talked to the residents. At that time, there was just the one building plus a little house where the caregivers lived.
Fleming, I think, was one of the early preachers who helped get this started.
I don't know if we received anybody directly in that couldn't afford it, but I know we received people in who later their money was depleted, and we kept them on and had to subsidize a little bit. So they've been a big help to people who don't quite have enough money. But it almost always is they run out of money after they get here. They don't kick anybody out. So.
Then went into what we call a retirement home. And actually, I think it was established with the idea of partially providing for retiring ministers and their families. But they did allow others to come in eventually in order to support it properly. But it really started as almost a single-purpose institution of retirement. And now with the scope of the way society is today and having medical experience and branching out that way, it's really enlarged the scope of what Methodist Manor has. And I've seen them build from the stage where they just really had residents. Then they started having some medical facilities. And then they went to branching out into different types of residential properties, such as the patio homes and the homes on Sandusky Avenue, that kind of thing. And then when they built this building, I thought we probably had seen the ultimate, but apparently there are still some things that are lacking.
The opportunity came available for the Methodist Church to buy the land. And it's 40 acres and with one building on it. That was a very old building, not in great shape, but it was a good start. And then early after that, the committees were able to develop the first addition to the manor, which was a 4-story building that's now called the Felt House, and it went out to the east of the old building. And I think there were right at 100 people able to live there. They were individual rooms with a bath and had a dining room somewhere else.
One time when it was so small, we only had one man that took care of all the maintenance. It was that small. But as it grew, we had to get more and more people, and it's just quite a change.
At about that time, they started the Sandusky Street, and people had the right to build a home there, designed to their design, and they built the home at their own expense. The only agreement was that whenever they left, that home was turned back to the manor. They had no residual value in it.
Individuals planned and designed so that the houses along Sandusky and the cul-de-sacs that are included are different floor plans and different sizes.
Well, I've known about the manor since it started. My dad was a Methodist minister, and he was all for this. He wasn't on the committee or anything, but he was all for the manor. And I remember when the administrator, and I think he was the first one, Reverend Don Lagrone, built the first house on Sandusky. There was just one house there. And then they just gradually added some. And my parents built one in 1970.
Then the next things built were the Lions buildings. And they were, again, just more rooms, but then they had their own dining room, but the food was still prepared in the central kitchen and brought to the Lions buildings. And that was up to somewhere in the range of 73.
Lions 1 and 2, all on one level, and they were darling little apartments, and they had their own dining room, and we would eat there. Some Sundays we would eat with them over there. We had to be here for meals every Sunday.
In about 1984, we decided we needed more independent living, and we needed to develop a little different plans for people than the individual rooms and a bath. Well, then we developed the patio homes and the lakeside homes. At the time, the homes weren't considered lakeside homes because there was no lake there. That had not been developed as a lake. It was just a creek all the way down through there. So that's why some of those really don't open to the lake as we know it now. But the patio homes then created independent living, and again, they were financed in the same way that the homes on Sandusky were. They were financed by somebody paying the cost of one of those units and then having the right to live there.
The patio homes are identical plans, 2 bedrooms, 2 baths, and a 2-car garage, and that's appealing to a number of people, that particular size.
Hugh and Imogene Hendricks and the Norvalls were the first people that moved in over there. Bud and I are the only originals left in the patio homes.
When we developed the patio homes is when we really started expanding the type of facility, which in turn was for more people, more family-oriented, or by family as couples, younger people, people that wanted to make a life like this, not people that had to go to a senior living place. In fact, that's why we're here, is because there is a lot of activity And they probably wouldn't be here if we didn't have the Span Wellness Center, because that's very much a part of those of us that are still physically active.
The early times of the Methodist Manor, we were around whenever we first established it. When I was a superintendent of Stillwater District, I was responsible for leading a finance campaign that brought churches in from all over the state to help raise funds and complete a project that they had. Later, I was the superintendent of the Tulsa District, and at that time, the superintendent of the Tulsa District was automatically the chairman of the board. So I served 5 years as chairman of the board. And I was here when the Fleming Center was built. I didn't realize at that time how important it was, but now it is a very important part of the manor.
My husband, Hubert Porter, had a lot to do with the building of the manor. He helped build the Fleming Center and just was involved with the manor in lots of ways.
In 1993, we realized we needed a new nursing home that was much more current than the nursing homes that we had. So we developed what now is the nursing home and handled 2 units of 42 persons each, 42 persons in one floor and 42 in the top floor.
They built the what is now the health center. The old health center was where Holloman is, and they made Holloman then into the assisted living. And then they tore the Lyons apartments down, which were one-story affairs, and that's where Crestwood is now.
Lyons was built, the first one was in 1964, I think, and the second one was in 1966. So it was time for that building to come down when it did. And the people that lived in Lyons, it was really, really hard for them to see that building come down because that was their home.
And then Crestwood, being the newest independent living, have, I believe it's 20-some floor plans, all different sizes, and quite a variety of floor plans to choose from.
Since Crestwood has been built, we're together a lot, and we're together in the exercise area, and people know each other, and it seemed like everybody's a friend. And before, we didn't have that opportunity, I think, to have so much fellowship with each other. In the early days, 8 members of our Sunday school class signed up to come to Crestwood. So it was kind of like family. All of them didn't end up here, but most of them did. So we had friends already when we came.
The administrators were wonderful. We've had lots of them now, even since I retired.
Yeah, Dr. Fleming was a friend of mine. He was on the cabinet. In those days, we chose the superintendent, and he usually was a preacher, which I don't think is a good idea because we didn't have that type of experience. But Doug was asked to be the superintendent or executive director, and he and I before were on the cabinet, and I believe he left the cabinet to become director here.
Charles Richardson, who was the husband of Anna Freeman, was the executive in charge.
Charles was the director. It was called director here at the time. There was no CEO. And he ran the place, and he had to be on call 24/7. A lot of times had to come back to the manor for some emergency. Charles' secretary, Hattie Bell, was a wonderful person, and I just adored her. She was with him as long as he was here.
I remember after Charlie Richardson, Elson Hargrove came in and was quite effective as the director. I've watched people like Ann Ford, who then married a nice minister and took up work here. It was just wonderful. It's contributed a lot.
I was on a committee that helped to choose the chief officer of the manor, and Steve Dickey was one of the candidates, and he was the one that we interviewed in Christ Methodist Church. We chose him. He was a very apt candidate.
In January of 2004, I got a call from Tom Junk, who was the chairman of the board at that time. And he informed me of Oklahoma Methodist Manor's search for new executive director. He was familiar with the fact that I was then serving as the executive director of a United Methodist-related healthcare agency in North Mississippi. And so I came to interview and ended up being invited to join the staff of Oklahoma Methodist Manor as the executive director in March of 2004.
One of my early experiences was with Steve Dickey. He was a pastor in the Tulsa district when I was superintendent. And I think he was on the staff at First Methodist Church, and maybe, I think he served Harvard Avenue Methodist Church. And then he went away and got some great experiences. So he's the first, I think, really experienced executive director that we've had. And he's good.
The membership of the board really consisted of 5 people that were the executive committee, which had been on that committee from the first, and then about 24 people at each Methodist church in the district. And that gave a chance for the Methodist Manor to be represented to the Methodist churches of the district. And that board only met either 3 or 4 times a year. The executive committee, of course, met and ran the operation. So everything that was done was with the administrator and the executive committee.
Early, I volunteered to complete a finance drive. And then when I became superintendent, I automatically was chairman of the board.
I believe it was 1999 that I was nominated to serve on the board. We have 3-year terms. It's composed of civic and community leaders from Tulsa that I wouldn't have had an opportunity to become acquainted with, and have formed some real friendships with some of those people that I might not have known otherwise. Even though Methodist Manor is a not-for-profit agency, it does have to be run as a business in order to survive in today's economy. The board's policy is to bring different viewpoints from different business and life experiences to contribute to the overall policy of the manor.
I originally started working here in June 1967, and I worked here for as a secretary for Dr. John Webb, and he was worked for him 7 years, and Dr. Owen Gregg for 5 years, and both of those retired, and then Dr. Doug Fleming. So when my husband retired at the end of 1980, that's when I resigned too. But I kept working as a volunteer for the manor. So Mrs. Fleming and I started up the resale shop. And we had 2 little tiny rooms in the central building. And it was pretty crowded, but we made a lot of money. And at that time, we bought washing machines for each of the floors of the central building.
I was approached to work in the bargain basement. And I enjoy that, and I still do that. It's a great service for the help here can buy affordable furniture and clothes and things that they could probably not afford otherwise. So it's a real service.
At that time, they had auxiliary, both men and women, who did various volunteer jobs around taking a little what they call cheer cart around with daily necessities, Kleenex, soap, and we just pushed that around, and residents could buy that if they needed something there. Annually, we had a bazaar for fundraising, which helped with residents who outlived their resources, I guess you'd say. We worked all year on little handmade items and sold those at the bazaar. There was a lot of fellowship in that, as well as the little bit of fundraising that we managed to do.
I was the treasurer of the women's auxiliary for the manor. I didn't think I was qualified, but ended up doing it for 6 annual.